This podcast contains discussions of violent and disturbing content that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is strongly advised. The views and opinions expressed are for informational and entertainment purposes only and do not necessarily reflect those of the podcast's creators, hosts, or affiliated parties. If you or someone you know is in need of support, please reach out to a qualified mental health professional. This episode is brought to you by listeners like you, fueling our podcast and giving us the boost behind this mic. Thank you for your support.
Prepare for warp speed as we embark on a voyage through the vast expanse of science fiction in movies and television series. From distant planets to alien civilization, we delve into the heart of the unknown, unraveling the tales that have captured audiences for generations. Get ready to unlock the secrets of the universe on CodeFlix.
Greetings, fellow sci-fi and fantasy lovers. Welcome to CodeFlix, where we explore the TV shows and movies that shape our imaginations. I'm Andrzej Bonner, and in today's episode, we'll be looking at the science, transformation, and the horror of mutation in the movie The Fly from 1986. This is one of those unforgettable films that takes the idea of human evolution and twists it into something utterly terrifying in the most David Cronenberg way possible. My first real introduction to his work was actually through Rick and Morty and their hilarious but deeply disturbing reference to being Cronenberged. It wasn't until I saw The Fly that I truly understood what that meant. Pure, unfiltered body horror. The Fly oozes with the classic 80s sci-fi charm, where monsters aren't just creatures, they're tragic figures caught between science and self-destruction. The story follows a brilliant but eccentric scientist who, after finally getting his teleportation experiment to work, decides in a drunken haze to try it on himself. The twist? A common housefly sneaks into the pod with him, and what follows is a grotesque, heartbreaking transformation as their DNA begins to merge. As the line between man and insect blurs, we're dragged into a disturbing yet strangely empathetic journey. You want him to find a cure to fix the mistake, but Cronenberg doesn't offer much comfort. Instead, he shows us what happens when curiosity pushes past morality. Even though the body horror didn't shake me too much, I can only imagine how horrifying this must have been for audiences in the 80s or 90s. If there's one film that defines the terror of unchecked scientific ambition, it's this one.
The Fly is a 1986 American science fiction body horror film directed and co-written by David Cronenberg. Produced by Brooks Films and distributed by 20th Century Fox, the film stars Jeff Goldblum, Geena Davis, and John Getz. Loosely based on George Langeland's 1957 short story of the same name and the 1958 film of the same name, The Fly tells of an eccentric scientist who, after one of his experiments goes wrong, slowly turns into a fly hybrid creature. The score was composed by Howard Shore and the makeup effects were created by Chris Wallace, along with makeup artist Stephen Dupuis. The Fly was released on 15 August 1986, to positive reviews. It grossed $60.6 million at the box office, becoming a commercial success. Wallace and Dupuy's work on the film resulted in them winning an Academy Award for Best Makeup. The tagline of the film, "Be Afraid. Be Very Afraid," has been used in many other productions as part of popular culture. A sequel, directed by Wallace, was released in 1989. In November 2024, a new film set in the same universe as Cronenberg's film was announced, to be written and directed by Nikyatu Jusu. Seth Brundle, a brilliant but eccentric scientist, meets Ronnie Quaife, a science journalist, at a press event. He takes her back to his home and laboratory and shows her his invention, a set of telepods that allows instantaneous teleportation between them. Seth convinces Ronnie to keep the invention secret in exchange for exclusive rights to the story, and she documents his work. Although the telepods can transport inanimate objects, they mutilate live tissue, as demonstrated when a baboon is turned inside out during an experiment. Seth and Ronnie begin a relationship. Their first sexual encounter inspires Seth to reprogram the telepod to understand the makeup of living tissue. After he successfully teleports a second baboon, Ronnie hurriedly leaves to confront her editor Stathis Borans about his threat, spurred by his jealousy of Seth, to publish the story without her consent. Embittered and convinced she is rekindling her relationship with Stathis, Seth teleports himself alone, unaware that a housefly has slipped inside the transmitter pod with him. He emerges from the receiving pod seemingly normal. Seth and Ronnie later reconcile. Seth starts to exhibit increased strength, stamina, and sexual potency, which he attributes to the teleportation, purifying his body. Ronnie grows concerned about Seth's changing personality and the strange, bristly hairs growing from a wound on his back. Seth becomes arrogant and violent, insisting that the teleportation process is beneficial, and tries to force Ronnie to undergo teleportation. When she refuses, he abandons her, goes to a bar and partakes in an arm wrestling match, where he leaves his opponent with a compound fracture. He brings a woman named Tawny back to his warehouse to have intercourse. When Seth tries to coerce her into teleporting, Ronnie stops him and Seth throws her out as well. When his fingernails begin falling off, Seth realizes something is wrong. He discovers that the telepod computer, confused by the presence of two life forms in the sending pod, fused him with the fly at the molecular genetic level. Seth continues to deteriorate, losing body parts and becoming less human in appearance. After several weeks, he reconnects with Ronnie and says he is becoming a hybrid of human and insect he nicknamed Brundlefly. He has begun vomiting digestive enzymes onto his food to dissolve it and gain the ability to cling to walls and ceilings. He realizes he is losing his human reason and compassion, driven by primitive impulses he cannot control. Seth installs a fusion program into the telepod computer, planning to dilute the fly genes in his body with human DNA. Ronnie learns that she is pregnant by Seth and has a nightmare of giving birth to a giant maggot. She has Stathis persuade a doctor to perform an abortion in the middle of the night. Having overheard their conversation, Seth abducts Ronnie before the abortion can take place and begs her to carry the child to term, since it may be the last remnant of his humanity. Stathis breaks into Seth's lab with a shotgun, but Seth disfigures him with his corrosive vomit. Seth reveals his desperate plan to Ronnie. He will use the telepods to fuse himself and her, together with their unborn child, into one entity. As Seth drags her into one of the telepods, she accidentally rips off his jaw, triggering his final transformation into an insectoid human creature, shading decayed human skin. Seth traps Ronnie inside the first telepod and enters the other. The wounded Stathis uses his shotgun to sever the cables connecting Ronnie's telepod to the computer, allowing Ronnie to escape. Seth becomes fused with the metal door and cabling of telepod 2. As the deformed Seth crawls out of the receiving pod, Ronnie picks up Stathis' shotgun and hesitantly pulls the trigger, killing Seth at his request. Here are some themes and symbols from the film. Themes: The horror of transformation. At its core, the film explores the terror of physical and psychological change. Seth Brundle's metamorphosis into a human-fly hybrid represents the loss of humanity and identity, highlighting fears of bodily decay, mutation, and the unknown. Science and hubris. Brundle's downfall is sparked by his scientific ambition and arrogance. The film critiques the unchecked pursuit of knowledge, where ethical boundaries and caution are cast aside in favor of glory and personal obsession. Disease and decay. The transformation can be interpreted as a metaphor for terminal illness, notably AIDS, which was a major cultural concern at the time, portraying the emotional and physical toll of watching a loved one deteriorate. Love and loss. The emotional relationship between Brundle and Veronica adds tragic depth, showing the pain of watching someone you love change beyond recognition and the helplessness that comes with it. Identity and humanity. As Brundle slowly loses control over his mind and body, the film raises existential questions. What makes us human? Is it our minds, our bodies, our ability to love, or something more fragile? Symbols. The telepods represent the promise and peril of scientific advancement. Though they embody innovation, they also serve as the literal mechanism of Brundle's undoing. The fly itself. The insect is a powerful symbol of contamination, mutation, and the grotesque side of nature. It also reflects the idea of seemingly insignificant factors, like a fly, having catastrophic consequences. Brundle's decomposition. His gradual loss of teeth, nails, and skin symbolize the stripping away of humanity and the raw exposure of mortality and vulnerability. The video documentation. Brundle's recordings of his transformation serve as a mirror to his descent and as a chilling reminder of how scientific curiosity can become a self-destructive obsession. Veronica's pregnancy. Her fear of bearing a hybrid child encapsulates anxieties about genetic contamination, inheritance, and the uncertain future of life touched by unnatural science. Conclusion. The Fly, 1986, is a deeply disturbing yet emotionally resonant body horror film that uses the grotesque transformation of its protagonist to explore themes of science gone awry, loss of identity, and the fragility of the human condition. Its rich symbolism and psychological depth elevated beyond simple horror, offering a tragic meditation on love, mortality, and the price of ambition. Here is a character analysis of the primary characters in The Fly, 1986, directed by David Cronenberg. Seth Brundle, Jeff Goldblum. Seth is a brilliant but socially awkward scientist whose ambition and curiosity drive the film's central conflict. Initially charismatic and endearing in his eccentricity, Seth invents a teleportation device and decides to test it on himself, only to unwittingly merge with a housefly at the genetic level. As his body and mind gradually deteriorate, Seth becomes Brundlefly, a grotesque hybrid. His transformation is both physical and symbolic, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition, the loss of humanity through technological hubris, and the inevitability of decay. Seth's tragedy is in his slow awareness of what he's becoming, maintaining moments of humanity even as his body mutates beyond recognition. Veronica Quaife, Geena Davis. Veronica, or Ronnie, is a journalist who becomes both Seth's lover and emotional anchor. Intelligent, empathetic, and increasingly horrified by Seth's transformation, she serves as the emotional lens through which the audience processes the tragedy. Veronica's arc evolves from fascination and love to fear and heartbreak, culminating in a final act of mercy. Her strength lies in her ability to confront the horror directly while maintaining compassion. She also embodies the psychological trauma of witnessing a loved one succumb to disease, echoing real-world parallels to degenerative illness or addiction. Stathis Borans, John Getz. Stathis is Veronica's editor and ex-boyfriend. Initially presented as arrogant and possessive, his character softens over time as he becomes genuinely concerned for both Veronica and Seth. Despite his flaws, he represents a grounded human perspective on the madness that unfolds. Stathis transitions from a potentially unlikable figure to someone who tries to help stop the horror, ultimately risking his own life. His mutilation at the hands of Brundlefly also reinforces the physical consequences of moral choices and scientific recklessness. Themes reflected in the characters: Seth, obsession, the fragility of identity, body horror, and the corruption of genius. Veronica, love, loss, emotional resilience, and the human cost of transformation. Stathis, skepticism, redemption, and moral complexity. Summary: in The Fly, the characters are not just participants in a sci-fi narrative, they embody the horror of bodily disintegration, the limits of human understanding, and the emotional toll of watching someone transform into a monster. Each character is deeply human, making the grotesque metamorphosis at the heart of the story even more heartbreaking and resonant. Here is a detailed overview of the production and design. Production overview. 1. Development. Script by Charles Edward Pogue, with major revisions and direction by David Cronenberg. Produced by Brooks Films, the company founded by Mel Brooks, who intentionally kept his name off marketing to avoid genre confusion. The film was given a modest budget, $9 million, but became a massive success due to its intelligent writing, tight direction, and revolutionary makeup effects. To shooting locations. Shot entirely in Toronto, Ontario, at CFTO Studios and various warehouse locations. The tight production schedule and limited locations worked in the film's favor, intensifying the claustrophobia and psychological descent of the protagonist. Artist palette production design. 1. Set design. Production designer, Carol Spear, a longtime Cronenberg collaborator. The majority of the film takes place in Seth Brundle's loft laboratory, a key location symbolizing both scientific ambition and personal deterioration. Brundle's lab loft. A retro-industrial, open-concept warehouse space, sterile and scientific at first, later becoming grotesque and decayed, paralleling Brundle's transformation. Set dressing was intentionally sparse, focused on telepods, workbenches, lab gear, and later, deteriorating conditions. As Brundle mutates, the space becomes increasingly filthy, cluttered, and corroded, reflecting both physical and mental breakdown. Telepods design. Designed to look plausibly scientific, with inspiration from motorcycle engines, Cronenberg noted Ducati parts influenced their look. The interiors were filled with blinking lights, wiring, and industrial textures to enhance believability without relying on futuristic clichés. Makeup and special effects. 1. Creature and makeup effects. Chris Wallace, who won the Academy Award for Best Makeup, designed and executed the transformation of Jeff Goldblum's character into Brundlefly. The transformation was divided into 7 stages, each with progressively more disturbing prosthetics and animatronics. Makeup applications for Goldblum took up to 5 hours per stage as the film progressed. Notable innovations included realistic skin bubbling and decay using latex and silicone. Animatronic puppets for later stage Brundlefly, with detailed mechanisms for facial movement and insectoid behavior. Vomit drop effect, a grotesque but memorable scene using chemical foam to simulate enzyme-laced acid. 2. Physical performance. Jeff Goldblum collaborated closely with the makeup and movement coaches to evolve Brundle's posture, voice, and gestures, reinforcing the insect in a human body concept. Movie camera cinematography and visual style. 1. Cinematographer, Mark Irwin. Used a controlled, deliberate camera style to track Brundle's decline, with increasingly tighter shots and off-kilter angles. Color palette. Started in cool grays and blues, scientific, clinical. Shifted to sickly greens, browns, and yellows, organic, repulsive tones as Brundle mutates. Lighting. Initially bright and scientific. Gradually dim and shadowed, emphasizing bodily horror and the loss of humanity. Dress costume design. Brundle's costumes changed from casual, unassuming scientist gear to tattered clothing clinging to his deteriorating body. Geena Davis' character, Veronica, wore earth tones and professional attire, symbolizing stability and reality against Brundle's unraveling. Headphone sound and music. Composer Howard Shore delivered a powerful orchestral score, tragic, romantic, and menacing, that underlined the film's emotional core. Sound design emphasized the wet, squishy, buzzing textures of Brundle's transformation. The teleportation sequences were filled with mechanical hums, electric buzzes, and eerie silence, building anticipation and dread. Left-pointing magnifying glass visual and thematic symbolism. The telepods symbolized both innovation and self-destruction. The loft, once a sanctuary of intelligence and creativity, becomes a body horror cocoon where Brundle ultimately merges with machine and insect. Cronenberg subtly parallels Brundle's transformation with themes of terminal illness, example AIDS or cancer, loss of identity and humanity, obsession with perfection and control, trophy legacy and influence. Widely regarded as one of the greatest body horror films ever made. Its design influenced countless films and media, including District 9, Annihilation, and Black Mirror. Sparked discussions in cinema and literature about science's ethical limits, transformation, and human fragility. Spawned a less successful sequel, The Fly 2, 1989, with similar production design but lacking Cronenberg's psychological depth.
So here are my personal insights and interpretations of The Fly, including some favorite moments, some not so favorite moments, themes, and characters. So I have to start by prefacing that this is one of the most craziest films I have done to date, especially because of the fact that I mentioned it's a Cronenberg direction in terms of filmography and just the general sense of the film, right? So let's get into it. So in the opening scene, we are given and I have to say the transition from the title sequence into the thing was quite an interesting one because you just see where it just gently fades in, almost as how a fly or an insect would be able to see, because based on the optical receptors and all of that, right? I'm no scientist, guys, but this is what I have learned, that based on how they would be seeing, it would look to them a certain way. So the scene is almost faded in that style. I even initially was like looking at Seth Brundle, the guy who, Jeff Goldblum, of course, character, who him kind of did look already like a fly, kind of him big. You know what I'm saying? No disrespect to Jeff, but like, yo, yeah, I him big boss. But he meets with Veronica Quaife, who is played by Geena Davis, and she plays a science journalist who is basically trying to get her feet wet in science in terms of what the new breakthrough is going to be by some scientists. You know, it's kind of funny that this film decided to focus on that in terms of being that angle to get her there, because I wonder how much of science is that interesting to people that them like sitting around or going to conferences just to meet a scientist, just to hope that that scientist would reveal something awesome that they're probably working on or almost finished. Anyways, of course, in true nerd fashion, most scientists and some of us, you know, so-called nerds, we tend to boast about things that we are working on, and we love to talk about it, you know, just like what I'm doing now. But anyways, you know, when you find yourself in a situation that it's hard to not go around people and just start talking about what you're doing, like, you know, this is what I think it's going to be like and whatever. Not to say it's a conceited way, but it's just like you just want to share, what you've learned and the things that you had to go through to get to where you are. And that is what he was trying to do in a true fashion. So I enjoyed that scene where he was just basically like doing that and him bringing her home, bringing her to his warehouse lab home, right? / home, because it just seems to me that it's not weird that people would have some, especially, nerds, have somewhere dedicated in their home to do their private projects, just like myself, Yeah. So much things being reflected here. Anyways, Veronica, she follows him there and thing. And, initially I'm like, why is this woman not like just weirded out yet? But anyway, she's there, following what he's saying. And well, almost they want to give us the sense that she is trying to seduce him or try to keep his interest, I guess. So when he asks her to help him with demonstrating what his invention does, right? He asks her for something to be able to transport because he's gonna teleport, So him teleport the stocking that she gave him, and him tell her, say, boy, I'm able to do that, but it's not anything big, and he might try to tell her so that there's downside is that really and truly I want to be able to transport inanimate objects and stuff, And of course, Veronica, as some journalists or some persons, and I'm not going to say that all of them are like that, she just interested in the scoop. And so when she get this now and she's like, no, I'm going to publish this because I think this is interesting and I think that people are going to want to hear about this. And he tries to, persuade her from doing it. But of course, she doesn't want to take that because, hey, she don't want to sit down on this for too long. She take it to her editor at the magazine where she works, and he must say, boy, this is a good story, but I don't even know, because I guess at that time I didn't realize because, when I was watching the film, I ended up watching up to that point where she was talking to the editor, but then I had to do something that day, so I stopped watching. And then when I rewatched it from the beginning, now I kind of got the context of what was happening. Is that this man, the editor, was interested in her, right? Yeah, and what ends up happening really demonstrates it even more. Now, Seth come there now. Brundle reach other place, just as they were talking about it, just like any other fly, right? Right now, mosquito just pitched on me, but yeah, the magazine would have been published if he had not intervened at that point, and he used the magic word, apparently, quote unquote, burger. Right? Burger is the magic word. Can you believe that? Anyways, so he gets her basically out on a date because I would say this is their first date. And he's basically talking to her and giving her the full lay down and thing now that he realized that what she does and so on. And he's saying, may I beg you, don't put this out there yet because I don't want to ruin my chances of finishing. You don't want to jinx the thing. You want to make sure so you have it set a particular way and this is what you want to happen. So I even offer her the opportunity basically to say, all right, document the entire thing, not just this part of it with a stocking or, what I've shown you, but the entire thing. Let's go through the entire process. So they end up now basically cohabitating in that way now that because every day, all hours, and if you know, right? When we are working as nerds, we are working tireless hours. We're up till 2, right? I'm up till what time now? I don't even know what time it is, right? I'm not even looking at the clock because I'm working and working and working. So when we work beyond the hours and stuff, these things happen. So especially if you have someone close to you, you end up working together, things happen. I know, first-hand experience. Anyway, so he is trying to figure out how to transport living tissue. His first attempts with a baboon results in the creature being horribly mutilated, the flesh turned inside out. This is a very gory film, okay? He realizes that the machine doesn't understand living flesh, and that is why it doesn't know how to do what it needs to do, because, it's supposed to be doing something where probably taking the DNA at the level where it is information or data and rewriting that or recomposing it because it transports it over to the other pod, rewriting it into the proper sequence and so on. So probably it doesn't know how to treat flesh, as he says, but probably it's more biomechanical to me. That makes sense to me. If you're a scientist, chime in, please, in the comments. Let me know if I'm talking rubbish or if this makes sense. But I feel like it's more biomechanical because it have something to do with the biology as well as the mechanical processes. So, yeah. Anyways, after reprogramming it and configuring it and configuring it, I don't know what it really did to it. All right. And then I have to make this clear as well. He's a scientist, but he's working with others. Other persons would not have known his full plan, right? It's almost like you're working on a project and you outsource parts of it. So you make somebody do the arm, the leg, the feet, right? And then they send those to you and then you assemble them, you put it together to make the final product. Now, probably at some stage, you have to have certain conversations. And then if you have smart people working with you, them can kind of figure out, all right, if you ask me for build an arm, what could you possibly be using an arm for? There are dozens of things it could be, but there might be some practical aspects, something that would make sense, right? So at that level, I'm thinking maybe there was some understanding of what it could necessarily do, but at the same time, not fully interpreted so you can get to the, that level of detail. So probably that's what he was able to fill in because now he's putting it together. So he has to be able to put that together. So at first, my criticism with the whole thing was that he didn't seem to know much about how some of the stuff worked until you actually had to put things together or had to reconfigure things to make it work the way you wanted. But then in doing that, he showed that he should actually be where he should be pretty much well versed in the science and in the knowledge of it, at least, to be able to do it. So I have to give him props for that. Anyways, of course, because they have been cohabitating, as I said, because she tried to get the scoop, she document, she's using camera to record the journey and the the successes and the fails of all of the different permutations of the experiment. They develop a romantic relationship. You know how it go. And of course, Veronica's ex-boss, right, or ex-boyfriend, the same editor guy, he becomes jealous and him starts snoop around, trying to figure out what is going on, right? As they grow close and thing, less and less. So, you get to see that firsthand that, hey, sometimes people's feelings get in the way of certain things, right? And he seemed to come off as a jerk. That's the ex-boyfriend. So, yeah, I can see why she was like, yeah, not right now. I can't deal with this, right? He ended up posting something that he was not supposed to post, or it was not necessarily that it was out there yet, but he was telling her that, hey, may I go post this basically, and this is what I'm gonna post about the thing, because you all of a sudden you just start to change your tune on wanting to post. You came to me and you're like, you want to post it, and I was having my little questions about it, but now it is intriguing to me
So I want to post it for you because, yeah, reasons. I think, and I can understand, that people can be very vile about those things, yeah? Especially when the person who them did they with start to have interest in any other person outside of them. Anyways, so after them do the bump and grind, she abruptly leaves Seth, who at that time is thinking to himself like, why, but must do something wrong because look, I says, relationship mash up or something. So this leads him to in the night, get drunk and very angry about the situation and, feeling frustrated as well about the results of, testing and so on. And after seeing the victory that he would have gotten, because I didn't mention that, but if you've watched this film, you would have noticed that they had a success with another baboon that they tried. They were able to transport it successfully, healthy and everything so far. But he wanted to do some follow-ups, which is a good thing. This is what I can praise this film for, that it actually says, hey, we now just left it right here, so normally science would continue to do more research because, yes, even though this is a mini milestone in it, you still not going to say, oh, this is conclusive, we can start human trials. No, you want to actually continue doing some follow-up. You want to check in on that baboon for the next 3 months or so. Make sure you say them doing good. Make sure they're not present with nothing out of the ordinary, no DNA illnesses, no issues with genetics or nothing like that. Yeah, because they have been reconstructed at the cellular level, right? Right, so, I must say, yeah, you seem all right because you're under the drunken stupor. Yeah, you seem all right. So why not try myself? I want to get this thing going, and, as I said, under his emotions and stuff. And that's why you never get emotionally attached to certain things. You try to stay as objective as possible. And yeah, it doesn't always work, but yeah, you don't fling yourself into your work that way. Yeah.
We'll be right back after these messages. Content warning. This episode includes detailed discussions of violence. We strive to handle these topics with care, but some content may be upsetting to certain audiences. Listener discretion is advised. If you're enjoying the podcast, now's your chance to help it evolve before things get weird. Share it with a friend who loves sci-fi and drop a comment to let us know you're still human, we think. This isn't some monetized machine. It's a passion project, mutating one episode at a time. Every listen, follow, and share helps keep the transformation going. Just don't get too close. Things tend to get messy.
Yeah. Fling himself into the work by putting himself at danger by putting the machine to test experiment on himself, right? He would not have been aware at the time that Housefly had entered the pod, and honestly, it looked like the way they make it look like the fly want to come back out of the machine, out of the pod, but he couldn't find a way, and so the two of them got stuck in there, and the computer decides, say, hey, all right, I'm seeing 2 genetic markers or signatures or whatever it is that it says it saw. And it decides, we need to merge these 2 together. Perhaps at some level, when you write code and you write the conditions, then you say, if else, whatever. I say if else, whatever, for those who are not so versed in programming. But like the last case or the default, whenever everything else is not met, all the other conditions are not met, there's always one condition that will be met. It's default. And so to me, this default seems to be merger. So it merged 2 DNA together. Seth exits the pod and he looks at himself. He's naked, by the way. And Tati Baboon, I'm like, bro, go put on some clothes. That's what I was thinking. I said, bro, you just come back out of the machine naked. You need to go put on some clothes now. And you know what I'm saying? Yeah, you can talk and do what you want to do, but he's drunk same way. So yeah, you know what I'm saying? So of course, a series of things start to happen over time, slowly, right? Which is good. This is another good thing about what I enjoy about the film. It was realistic enough to show that why it not just happen over right away. It never just transform into a fly right there and then. No, it was a process. It took some little time, some days and stuff. Veronica came back and he manner, do the bump and grind couple time, and him even feel even more energetic. And ladies, gentlemen, you know how that go after, bump and grind. Yeah, you lose energy. No, this man seemed to gain energy, at more libidos. So he had initially there was a red herring, right? The red herring was that him to get a script on him back. And it was healing up nicely and stuff. And now after this experiment, the script now seems to be where the fly that's the first place we notice transformation is taking place. So it's coarse and it has, like fly hair sticking out. So he is, of course, very hypermaniac and stressed and so on. And these things continuously happening over time. We see the fact say, even him talking about the experiment and stuff and him wanting Veronica to join him as in come along the journey for do it and things. So initially him never pushy, but in over time start get very pushy about her doing it, like, yo, why you going there? You know what I'm saying? One at a time she noticed that him have, the sugar cravings, him a put more sugar in him coffee and stuff. And the course here grow from the same location on his back and stuff. And she become very concerned. She even try to cut the hair. And at that point, the man get very frustrated. Like, she cut it one ear and it's like, and get very frustrated. And he's like, boom. Yeah. Veronica, of course, realizing that something wrong now. She noticing that, why, him not act like the Seth Brundle that she initially got to know. And so, she getting very concerned, trying to figure out, trying to, do her own little research and stuff. But Seth start to have some fingernail fall off and, some skin peeling off. Yeah, it's that kind of movie, guys. He walks with a stick at one point, right? Because him can't support him body like a certain way. Eventually starting to look more and more monsterful and less human. One time she come there and she talk to him and she's terrified as well as she feels empathy for him. And that was a very impactful moment of the film, I think. The fact that she can be both terrified and empathetic people, that for sure, in a certain circumstance and always why you're terrified, but you feel empathetic at the same time. That, him give her a hug and she's like, should I be giving you a hug? But no, I can't not give you a hug in this situation because you go through this and only you will feel this and can't help it. Yeah. He eventually isolates himself and him figuring out, because he has been checking with all of the things that was happening to him now, because initially when he had come out of the pod, him feel terrific and he's like, yeah, me feel like me 100% and thing. I think this was a good idea, but now he's less and less convinced because of all the things that are happening to him, and him doing him investigation and research, checking the computer log, and him realized that he has been merged with a fly now, and he starts to dub himself Brundlefly. When she comes around him and stuff, him say, just document this thing and thing, you know? And there was a particular scene that's very gruesome. I'm not going to talk about it right now because it's very icky and I can't take it. But she comes there and she documents him, you know, eating. And at this point, he cannot use his teeth. I'm just going to let you watch the film, but he cannot use his teeth. And the only thing he can do is to swallow. But he has to do something first before he swallows. So you watch the film and you know, I know it's a deep dive, but I can't get into that because it's very icky, right? It's too icky for even me to mention. Yeah, so after that, it uses enzymes, guys. I know I can't not tell you this. Okay, I was preparing you guys. Okay, so now that you have turned your back on it and expected it not to come, he uses digestive enzymes to eat, which, if you know anything about biology, digestive enzymes reside in your digestive tract, right? Which is inside. So in order for you to get those digestive enzymes out of the body, you have to do something first, which is throw up or vomit. And so he vomits these enzymes over the food or whatever he's gonna consume, and it will digest it, and then you'll be able to swallow it, you know. Yeah. Of course, his body continues to decay, and, you know, it gets to a point where him can actually fly. Well, not really fly. Him can attach himself to the ceiling, right? Walking in the top of the ceiling. But, you know, Veronica coming there and, you know, seeing all of this. At some point, Veronica finds out that she's pregnant, and she's very horrified by this. She even has a nightmare about giving birth to a giant maggot. Hello, a Cronenberg we're talking about, you know, guys. This is why I'm going deep into this thing, and I'm giving you guys enough time to turn away and avert your eyes in the movie. But I'm just talking about it, and I'm thinking about it myself, and it's very, very gory. Yeah. The plan now for Veronica is to abort the pregnancy because she has said she don't want to bring whatever is coming. And you can imagine the terrifying nature of this feeling to be like, yo, I don't want to bring nothing like this into the world. I don't know what it's gonna be, right? When she went to see him one at a time to probably tell him about it, but she couldn't tell him because of the situation and how he looked and so on, and, you know, what he was going through, and to heap this upon him seemed like it was poor taste. So when she went outside while talking to her ex about it and be like, because right now she can rely upon for help her, right? And he's being a real trooper because he might help out and thing, and he's not being weird, right? And Seth, you know, the Brundlefly overhears, right, that she, you know, intends to take the baby and, you know, abort it. So him follow her to the location where the abortion is to take place, and just as they put her on the table and, you know, getting prepared and ready, him burst in through the window, you know what I'm saying, and him take her and stuff. And of course, he's strong enough now so he can leap on them thing now, you know, almost fly, right, like a fly. So they leap. If you know about flies, right, again, scientists, they don't really do a lot of, like the house flea, they don't really do a lot of flying with their wings. It's more of a lot of hops and skips, but they're very energetic, so them can jump, right? So it was an example of what it would look like, right? Anyways, so in body basically no more human right? It's, you know, the facial features might still be there, but it was very grotesque. So the ex-boyfriend ended up have to come and rescue Veronica, right? Him end up getting injured because him try to kill Brundlefly, right? And use the acid from him stomach to burn hand and foot off. Yeah, that's another gory thing. And the Brundlefly decides, say, Veronica needs to become or be fused with him, right? So that she can have the baby. 3 of them can have the baby. I don't know what the thinking is. Probably it's a fly part of his brain is like, frazzled or something, because I thought that he was trying to, at this point, I was thinking probably him still a try to rectify him situation. Him a try to fix the issue by probably like, using her DNA as a base, and then they would possibly be able to use the 3 telepods to probably split them out or something like that. But apparently no, his intention was to merge them. Yeah, that was horrific to hear. Not just see, but to hear what he was planning to do. So he starts to initiate the fusion process, right? Veronica in one of the pod them and think I'm strong, him saying him force her into the pod. And just as the process start to initiate and thing, the ex-boyfriend who almost, half a dead, not really half a dead still, but he was in a bad state because him hand get burnt off and him foot. He tried to disconnect her pod from the process. So he was successful in stopping that, destroy it just in time. So, of course, him get set now, or Blunderfly would have been trying to escape back out of the pod for come and stop the process or, restart the process and so on. But the process would have been at a good way, that it started, and as him opened the door, the teleportation took him and part of the machine, right? And the other telepod that it ended up going to, yeah, it opened, and when it opened, we see that he is fused with the telepod itself, and he seems to be in an horrific state, right? Yeah, it was horrible to see. I mean, yeah, that was one of the most horrific things I've seen since, a long time, since I watched The Thing. Yeah. If you guys know what The Thing is, leave a comment as well. But this grotesque view of everything, and then, to see that in that moment, it seemed to be that he realized that this was it. And, he was trying to crawl out and stuff and thing, and Veronica got the shotgun from the ex, and she hold the shotgun above him head, ready for, she don't know where she really got to, because she couldn't do it. But him hold on upon it, like him has said, do it. Take me out of my misery. She backs up and she's like, I can't do this and thing. And Butterfly is almost like it a plead for her, please take me out of my misery. And she eventually kills him. She shoot him in the head with a shotgun. Right? And the film ends on that bleak and quiet note. Veronica is weeping over what is left of Brundle. That's it for my analysis. This one was a whopper, guys. Comment, like, share. So here are some of my theories about unresolved mysteries or plot points. So there is a big banger of an ending, right? Especially with the fact that Veronica is pregnant, right? She's still pregnant, right? So the fate of this pregnancy is what is at question. Is the child human, mutant, or something else? And of course, this ambiguity must be deliberate because the film no clarify nothing, right? Where the conception happen, you will never get to see it actually being ultrasound or nothing like that, so we can actually know. All right, the baby kind of look like a baby now, but could it transform, right? And could it have those genes that probably when it reach a certain age, it starts to, and the ages of flies, I think some amount of a scientific understanding that, yeah, those things as well. So those are some of the things that come up where that is concerned, right? There were some earlier drafts and some deleted scenes that included where Veronica was dreaming about her child as a butterfly, right? Suggesting a more hopeful or ambiguous outcome and perhaps symbolizing, a transformation of the possibility that something positive could emerge from the horror. This pregnancy, it serves as a metaphor for the unknown, right? Bodily transformation. We all went through it at some stage, right? If you're an adult, right? You would have gone through that change, right? And at the time, it wouldn't necessarily be horrific, perhaps, for many of us. But once you were properly taught about, human development in school, you would have been like, okay, so I'm expecting that this would happen. I would expect my voice to change. I expect these things to happen. But imagine having to have all of these things happen to you, right? Or happen to a child that you are carrying as a woman. Now that is a mind fest of things to think about. Another thing that comes up is Brundle's final plan and its implications. And, I would have suggested in the beginning of the podcast that maybe really a hope theme, maybe they have out hope. Because may I say, he was onto something, he was trying to figure out the thing and him at a point, and I'm like, probably him could have been able to, we might have seen at the end of the film, but just to see what happened, I'm like, yo, why did that happen? Why did that have to happen at all? Right? I mean, probably the transformation took a long time to come, and probably it was messing with him in terms of that. And as I said, the chemistry of the brain probably changed, and so he's not really himself, thinking like himself normally, even though he still might retain certain little things. And so that is why he came to that, idea, right? He was very desperate for his humanity, right? So him to have a plan in mind, a last ditch of effort, for be able to get back him humanity, right? And the ultimate family, what was his idea really? Fusing the three of them into being both horrific and tragic. What was the end goal? That's what I'm thinking for that Brundlefly. And as I keep referring to him as Blunderfly at that point, because it seem like it's still rational, or it still have, it felt like it was more of the instincts of the insect that was driving him at that point. And then we think, well, what if he had succeeded? What if he had exceeded his expectation and succeeded? And of course, the film kind of leave up that question, for us to figure out, right, that probably if this had happened, there would have been some hybrid out there. It would have led to something different, right? Perhaps a different form of evolution, right? I don't know how much of it would be retained, you know? Yeah, that's crazy. So, looking at it a little bit scientific, right? Brundle's transformation, what was the nature of it? Because while we're thinking about the mechanics of the transformation, right? The computer fuses his DNA with that of a fly. But there are some things that stem from this that aren't fully realized or understood or clear. Obviously, I feel like Brundle's consciousness wasn't fully intact. Yes, there might have been that final resolution where he begs for death. You know, that kind of give us an insight to say, well, perhaps there was a little bit of humanity remaining, but it never really spelled it out, really. You know, the transformation was interpreted as a metaphor for, you know, like disease or aging and even the loss of self, right? There are some nuances to it, of course, but you can read into it for say, boy, you know, there is that whole idea of, you know, trying to become better as a person, you know, some improvement, because when Brundle initially went into the machine and came out, he was overjoyed with the fact that, hey, I kind of feel different. I feel better. That's what he described it as. So he was overjoyed with the fact that, hey, may have something here that could actually, because it scrambled my DNA and then reconstitute and restructure them, perhaps it was able to make me a better person, you know, in terms of biologically, you know, and physically. And it makes you think about the fact that what would have happened if he was able to be successful and the housefly did not enter the equation. Does it mean that it would be the start of something new where humanity would be able to use a telepod to transport themselves, go to different areas of the world and whatever? And what are the lingering effects? Because if he had not gotten drunk and used it on himself, he would have probably tried to get the baboon checked out and stuff, and, you know, ensure that the baboon all right and think. Perhaps the baboon get cancer in a few months, you don't know, right? So he would have to go solve for that particular thing. So, you know, science is always asking the tough questions, because you need to be able to not just look at the little things that might happen. You know, yes, it's successful in this particular arena, but is it lasting? You know, and you don't want to put something out there that is going to cause more harm than good. You want to make sure that at the end of things, we are able to say, all right, this thing works to this point and we can follow it. We can do the necessary tests to ensure that this process is completely proved to that point of understanding, and we can be able to do it. That's how vaccines and all of those other things are done anyways, right? And should continue to be done, right? And if you have a case where the scientific community is not able to perform these basic things that they need in order to get us to that point, as a human race, I'm sorry to say, we're going to be stuck in the dark ages again. We're going to revisit the dark ages because we lack understanding of certain things and we're not, you know, able to move forward, where we are going to be just thinking that, hey, we have solved for everything, or, you know, because one particular person comes and say, why this particular thing causes autism. How does it cause it? What makes that the case? Let us test it. Is that the case? How many samples of persons coming in took the vaccine and this is what really happened? Why do you think this is the vaccine? Those are the questions that science can answer and will continue to answer, and with enough evidence to be able to put certain things to bed. Why is it that we can be able to do those things? And this film, that's why I'm so happy for a film like this, is that it treats this aspect of science as the default and the proper thing to do. So it's not a flashy presentation of science. It actually shows it that, hey, this is something that is happening. There are some steps that are skipped, but really and truly, this is the consequences, the unintended consequences of skipping these steps. That's why we have oversight, right? And I can't say this enough. I can't stress this enough, that science is a self-correcting process. It attempts to answer the questions, and other persons can externally take on the mantle of looking at it. That's why everyone needs to understand some basic science so that you can be able to weed out the things that make sense, the facts from the fiction, right? Sometimes the films get it right in certain instances, but in other instances, they don't. And that's what films are. They are about a vision of what could be and not what is, right? It is more of bringing a light or shining a light on particular aspects, but it doesn't mean it's the whole entire picture. That's it for my theories and the unresolved mysteries, and me just giving you a better understanding of what I think science is. Share your theories, your favorite moments, whether you agreed with what my favorite moments and my theories are. Please give me some feedback in the comments. So in this episode, we looked at The Fly from 1986. We looked at the science, transformation, and the horror of mutation. And I know I've explained a lot about science in this episode and how transformation can be viewed from the angle of just the human journey. Who are we? Where are we going? Which is what some of the questions science continues to try to answer, because it's not definitive. These questions are ongoing. There are debates about whether or not the questions are even the right questions. So we are continuing to do that transformation. Now, the horror of mutation comes through the unexpected results, the unintended things that happen. Many times we hear stories about a particular animal that is in the wild and they might be going extinct, or there might be animals that are deep in the ocean, fish and creatures that we've never encountered, right? They might seem to be at the lower end, but those are some of the unknown things. Even down to the bacteria that lives on the end of a pin, those are living. They might be mutations that would have taken hold over millennia to become what they are currently in the state that they are. And it's not that they are done, it's always continuing. So the mutations can be both considered to be something awesome as well as something very horrific. Viruses and bacteria exist because of those mutations. And we continue to fight the common cold and flu, all of these viruses. And it is because of the understanding of the theories around science that has been able to assist us in inoculating our populations. So again, I also want to appeal that we need to give science its due, give it its room to be able to work, to properly identify and to treat the circumstances, the symptoms, everything that we are trying to wrestle with. And I hope that many of you who are listening, who are scientists or at least science-minded, will echo this to your fellow scientists and friends. That's it.
And that's a wrap on this episode. We've crossed 1,000 downloads. Thank you for being a part of this journey. Now, the mission continues as we set our sights on 1250. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure to follow, like, and share. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.